You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Hello, my name is Daryl Taft. I'm senior editor with the New Stack, and I'm here today with Joel Marcey, who is the director of technology at the Rust Foundation. And we're here to talk about what's new in Rust. Hi, Joel. How are you?
Hey, Daryl. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show today. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
We couldn't wait to have you, especially after RustCon just 2 weeks ago.
So, yeah, it felt like yesterday, but yeah, it has been about 2 weeks.
So what were some of the big takeaways from the conference in your mind?
Yeah, I thought the conference I thought was awesome, actually. I think my big takeaway was that the Rust community is as motivated and vibrant as ever to see like Rust continue to grow and succeed as like a broad first-class programming language for developers. The foundation actually managed the production of the conference, and we were like full capacity. We had our overflow was like a live stream that we had for people who couldn't join the conference, and that had plenty of people join as well. So everyone was like really excited to see what RustConf had to bring. I think the talks of the conference were varied as well. So, there were talks about like understanding how the Rust project works at like a logistical level, like all the teams and how they interact with each other, to making a game with Rust, to using Rust in Linux. So it felt to me like people were bringing the various uses of Rust to bear. And that kind of was a big takeaway for me, like the really excited community and the kind of the broad usage of the language.
Okay. So what would you say is the state of Rust in the programming world right now?
Yeah. So there's this survey that comes out every year from Stack Overflow. It's the Stack Overflow Developer Survey, which I kind of use as like the gauge of the state of development and programming in general. So Rust continues to hold like a strong usage and adoption metric. It's like one of the top 15 programming languages. And I think maybe more importantly, it's also, again, for like the 9th year in a row or something, 8th or 9th, I think it's the 9th. It's the most admired and loved language amongst developers. So Rust continues to like be used in its bread and butter use cases of systems and backend programming, but we're now seeing Rust gaining traction in areas like embedded systems, safety critical applications, game development. And I kind of alluded to this before, like even using Rust in the Linux kernel is also getting some run now. So Rust is basically starting to expand its horizons from its initial use case of, okay, Rust is a really safe and fast systems language. Now it's going to like, hey, we can use Rust on the web with the Wasm backend. Like there's a lot of other things that are starting to be considered for Rust now, which I think is good for it moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Wasm. How much of an impact has Wasm had on Rust adoption and usage?
I think it's still starting to. I think it's still in its infancy. I think the fact that Wasm exists allows for Rust to be utilized with other languages to like build web applications now. If it didn't exist, Rust on the web, I don't think becomes much of a thing. But it's still going to take some time for people to realize that you can utilize Rust for general purpose web-based applications. But I think given maybe a year or two, we'll probably see a lot more growth there.
All right. So what would you say is it that makes Rust a better choice than languages like Go for certain applications?
Yeah, it's funny. So the Stack Overflow developer survey I mentioned, Go and Rust are back to back in popularity. So Go is like 14 and Rust is like 15 in the popularity metric for programming languages. And I work at the Rust Foundation, so you might expect my first instinct to be like, use Rust for everything. Give up your Go programming, and Rust is obviously the better choice for anything. But I do try to stay semi-objective and follow the whole best tool for the job mantra. Or if like your staff is already familiar with Go, you may just want to stick with Go for your development. So there are many similarities between the two languages, which allows for either one to be the right choice given your use case. So I think you can consider both general purpose programming languages that focus on memory safety and produce really efficient code. But if you want to speak in terms of Rust, if you care about like eking out every last bit of performance and speed, and that speed of execution matters like above anything else, you may want to give it a look, right? I think Rust has a little bit of an edge there. I think Go, compiles really fast. Rust compiles a little bit slower, but in that compilation phase, you get a bunch of execution and performance enhancements. So you may want to give Rust a look for areas like game programming or operating systems or embedded systems or areas like that. If like eking out that last bit of fastness is a core thing for you.
Okay. So Joel, how much of an impact has the federal push for memory safe languages had on the adoption of Rust?
Yeah, so it's great to see, great to see that the U.S. federal government is beginning to consider Rust. In fact, there's one example. Just a couple of weeks ago, DARPA just announced an initiative called Tractor, which is an effort to translate all C to Rust. So, if DARPA is looking into moving away from their C code to Rust, that's a good sign for the federal government at large, in my opinion. So I think they're definitely taking it seriously, but as you know, it takes some time for adoption to stick, particularly like in government areas. So I think adoption impact will trail a bit within like the government saying, "Hey, I want to use it. I want to use Rust." Oh, there's some steps that the government's going to have to go through in order to make that happen. That said, having governments consider a programming language like Rust as a first-class citizen and utilize within its own agencies, I think will surely like open the eyes of other businesses who may be on the fence of using Rust. The U.S. government tends to have some sway when they announce that they're going to be doing some stuff.
Okay. Well, what's the status of the Rust C++ Interupt project?
Yeah. So the Rust C++ interoperability project, which was generously funded by Google for the foundation, that was done earlier this year. It's basically an effort to make it as easy as possible for Rust and C++ to understand each other so that they can potentially be used in the same project or the same code base or that sort of thing. So, for example, with organizations that might have millions of lines of C++ in a flagship product, rewriting all of that in Rust in a reasonable time frame is probably not practical and probably untenable due to like a myriad of business reasons or technical factors or whatever that is. The Interupt initiative will hopefully make that decision and process of investing in Rust kind of smoother for those type of organizations that are invested in C++ around the globe. So right now, the status is that we're just finishing up the problem statement and strategy document for the initiative, which should be published to the world soon. I'm hoping in the next few weeks. And then after that, the real fun begins, basically starting the actual tactical work to make this initiative a success. So we're going to see some good progress coming out of that in the later, towards the end of this year into 2025.
Okay, great. What's new in terms of the Rust language, and what should we expect to see added to the language spec?
Yeah. So Rust 1.81, I think it is, came out this month with its normal list of improvements and changes. You can always go to blog.rustlang.org to see everything that's kind of happening with all the releases. One thing that just piqued my interest, just because I'm kind of an algorithms geek, was that there are new sort implementations in the language utilizing better algorithms in order to gain better performance. So, if you're a big, sorter of things in Rust, you might see performance improvements because of that. I need to kind of dig in exactly what those algorithm changes were, but I just found that as being fairly interesting. That was a thing that came out this month. One big thing that has just come out over the last month or so are the project goals for the rest of 2024 for the project as a whole. You can also find that on the Rust blog as well. So here's where the Rust project got together, determined what are the big ticket items that should be focused on in order to continue improving and innovating the language. And there's a list of 15 to 20 things that they're looking to do. And different teams in the Rust project are taking various pieces of those to work on the rest of the year. But the big three ticket items are they're going to come out with the Rust 2024 edition. An edition is basically the Rust way of introducing changes into the language that would not otherwise be backwards compatible. And you can kind of opt into those, and that should be coming out this year. There's async improvements. So basically improving the experience of building network systems in Rust. And then finally, and I mentioned this a couple of times before, improving Rust for Linux, given the fact that there's some momentum there, basically continuing to enable safe abstractions for low-level systems operating systems in Linux and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, there was a recent issue with the Rust for Linux project where one of the members quit or something, but Linus Torvalds made an issue of it at a conference last week. He said there were religious undertones involved in the Rust versus C. I don't want to call it a controversy, but the issue about Rust versus C. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I don't comment too much on kind of those type of religious wars that may be occurring between the communities. I think there's definitely a way for all the C and the C++ and the Rust community to kind of work in harmony, to kind of do what's right for the various big projects that exist in the world. Which is why, for example, we just talked about, we have the initiative to make C++ and Rust interop better, right? Because we know that some people are going to want to use C++ for the most part, but hey, maybe I want to use Rust a little bit to do a couple of things, and we want to make sure that's kind of seamless for them. There'll always be these kind of comments and religious wars, I think, in the industry. But personally, I just kind of try to focus on making Rust the best it can be for developers at large.
Yeah, that's a good response. I appreciate it. Two other things I do want to talk about, and they're not together, but the Rust Security Initiative and the Safety Critical Rust Consortium. Can you talk about each of those and where things are?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the Security Initiative. So the Rust, just as a little bit of background, the Rust Security Initiative, which was funded by OpenSSF's Alpha Omega project and Amazon Web Services, or AWS, for the foundation, basically has a goal to ensure that Rust and the Rust ecosystem continue to be one of the most secure development platforms on the planet. I mean, that's kind of the broadest mission. So we basically want to try to stay ahead of the vulnerability curve and eliminate security burdens for the Rust project maintainers as best we can. So we're in the second year of the initiative, and we have published threat modeling around various areas of the Rust ecosystem. So from crates to the Rust project infrastructure. And the foundation itself has also created two technical projects called Painter and Typomania. Painter basically builds a graph database of dependencies and function invocations between all crates in a crates ecosystem. And so you ask, why is that important? Well, if there's ever a crate vulnerability, we will know with Painter all of the crates that will be affected by that vulnerability just by running that tool. And that could help us figure out, what crates we may have to quarantine or contact the owners of in order to make sure that we can resolve any vulnerability that might come about as quickly as possible. Typomania is basically used to detect potential typo squatting within the crates ecosystem. So typo squatting is when someone publishes a crate with a name that looks like something that's really popular, but maybe with a character missing or something, and people get confused. So we created this tool to detect those potential typo squatting crates, and to basically, in order to help developers avoid using a crate that may have a name similar to an existing crate, because anybody who does like those typo squatting things are definitely trying to be, for the most part, malicious. Our big focus in the security initiative now is supply chain security. So, you've seen recent vulnerabilities like XZ and all these things. We wanted to work on provenance tracking directly, verifying that like any crate is actually associated with the repository it claims to be from. So that way there's like a verified match of code to the code producer. So that's important when vulnerabilities might come around as well. And you can see a bunch more of that about this we just published a technical report on our foundation website that talks a bunch about other things that are going on in the security initiative as well. You asked about the safety critical Rust consortium. In June, we and the founding participants announced this new group dedicated to the responsible use of Rust in safety critical software. And the Rust Foundation is kind of overseeing the logistics of this consortium, kind of hosting it, if you will. The primary objective of the group is to support the responsible use of the Rust programming language in safety critical software. So, these systems that if they fail, they can impact human life or cause severe environmental harm or property harm or anything like that. So we just held our first meeting this month, right before RustConf in Montreal, the same city where RustConf was. We had 35 people attend it, at least 35, maybe a little bit more. And there was general excitement amongst the group about where this consortium can go. It was a good sign that we decided we're going to meet again, definitely at Rust Nation in 2025. And people were clapping at the end of the meeting because they found it very useful, and that was great. So now I'm in the middle of getting the infrastructure set up necessary to help manage this consortium, like a GitHub repo, membership criteria. We have a lot of people who want to join, and those sorts of things. And a summary and minutes of that first meeting should be published very shortly.
Okay, well, I think you answered my next question, but I wanted to know if there are any standout Rust projects that you can point to other than the two that you just mentioned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. As the Rust Foundation Director of Technology, want to extol the virtues of the projects that the foundation produces. So, yeah, I mentioned Painter and Typomania. Yeah, I mean, I tend to try not to play favorites with projects. I mean, the most downloaded crates kind of provide a glimpse into the key, and popular open source projects.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to know if you could talk about what a typical day is for you as the Director of Technology at the Rust Foundation.
Sure. So as the Director of Technology, I support the technical programs, technical initiatives, and engineers at the foundation. So we have 6 awesome engineers at the Rust Foundation. It makes up over half of our full-time staff, our engineering. I don't count myself in the engineering number, even though I'm a software engineer by trade, and we joke a lot that my team won't let me write code anymore, which is sad, but maybe true. But the foundation engineers are doing a lot of the great work that I talked about already in the security initiative and the Interupt work. We have infrastructure engineers who help maintain the Rust project infrastructure. So they're doing a wonderful job, even if I can't write code anymore. In addition to supporting them and supporting those initiatives, I'm actually directly working on the Rust specification work and the safety critical consortium. So I do have some direct involvement in the areas of focus that we have at the foundation, but my primary role is supporting just the overall vision of the technology work that we do here at the foundation.
All right, thank you. Last question from me is, can you discuss some of the experiences that you've had that brought you to where you are today as a leader in the Rust community?
Sure. So I graduated with a degree in computer engineering from NC State in well, I'll just say a while ago. I
Go
co-opted and
Wolfpack.
interned at a couple of, oh, yeah, Wolfpack there. I've co-opted and interned at a couple of companies in college like IBM, Ericsson, and Intel. And Intel is where I started my full-time career in like doing software and IT stuff. And my first language was this up-and-coming language called Java, which was I was like the Java support engineer at Intel, which was kind of fun. So I stayed at Intel for about 10 years, where my final stop was in a research department there. And I got involved in programming language standards, particularly the language C#. And I left Intel, briefly worked as a software engineer at another company. It was called RFMD at the time. I think it might have gotten bought out or disbanded, but and then I went out on my own. But during the time that I was doing the C# standards work at Intel, I met many folks at Microsoft and ended up being a consultant at Microsoft doing work on that specification. And then this leads into my Rust work. I became a contractor at Facebook for 2 years before working there full time for 7 years. And I primarily worked in the open source space as a developer advocate there, and also created a flagship open source project that Facebook has called Docusaurus, which I'm very proud of. But I then later became involved with supporting Rust at the company, particularly around getting Rust projects open source, figure out the best ways to support those. And then I was actually the first board member from that now Meta. It changed from Facebook to Meta in my time there at the Rust Foundation. So I was Meta's board representative at the Rust Foundation, where I served there for nearly a year. And this role came up at the foundation as a job opening to be what is now the director of technology. Figured, hey, I've been at Facebook for a while. Let's see if I want to do something new. Interviewed with Beck. We hit it off great. And I decided, and I was offered the job, thankfully, and decided to give it a go. And now here I am as the director of technology at the foundation.
It sounds like fun. It sounds like you've had a variety of good experiences in the industry.
Yeah. I feel like it's been a varied career for the most part. I do miss coding a little bit. I sometimes beg and plead for a little bit of coding work, and then like I said, I get shot down. I'm just kind of joking a little bit, but yes. It's been good so far.
Okay, well, this has been a good and insightful and enlightening conversation with Joel Marcey, the Director of Technology at the Rust Foundation. And I just want to thank you for being one of the latest to speak to us at the new stack and the new stack makers. And hopefully we can do this again. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Daryl. I enjoyed the discussion. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Have a great day.
You too.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.